This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on air with Dr. Michelle R. Hanna. And this is the first time we've had her on the show. And before we get into that, we do have a sponsor. We're on Newsly, so you can listen to us on Newsly within an hour. And what they do is they take podcasts like ours that are video and translate them to audio. They also take news articles, and you can set up alerts. So you can stop scrolling and start listening. Use coupon code GHOST and get 1 month free premium subscription. So I'm glad to have you on the podcast today. Like, how are you feeling today?
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm feeling good in sunny California.
Well, we're in New Hampshire, and it's a little bit chilly, so I'm wearing my hoodie.
Oh, yeah.
But
A little bit cold.
yeah, we're already chilly, but that's the nature of the Northeast. Tomorrow might be hot. You never know. But
Yeah, exactly.
so it's really interesting to have different types of people on the podcast. We started off just interviewing musicians because I'm a musician, and then we started
Okay.
interviewing actors. We had a CEO on last night. We've had other authors on. So, like one of the things I was reading about what you've done is that you're very well known in your public speaking for the last 15 years. And you're an author of The Breaking Point, a full cycle journey and workbook. And you also have a Vows, a guide to understanding your marriage. So I don't know, which one did you want to talk about first? Maybe talk about how you got into this type of work.
Well, it started when I was told one day when I was driving down the 405 freeway. And for those of you that live in California, you know what the 405 is like. So I'm driving down the 405 freeway, and my doctor calls and says that they think that I have cervical cancer. And 2 years prior to that, I kept saying to them that something was not right. And they were doing all kinds of tests on me, and they kept just saying, no, everything's fine. Everything comes out negative. And for whatever reason, I was an assistant dean for a university at the time, and I never really took lunch. And that day, I just said, I'm going to the doctor, and I'm going to demand that they do a biopsy. I didn't even know what that all entailed, but my core just was telling me, like, you need to ask for a biopsy. I didn't know how painful that was without anesthesia, but at that point, I just had it. I just needed to know.
Yeah.
So once I was told that, my life started to, in that moment, move in slow motion. Like, I started to think about all the things that I didn't want to regret. Because when you hear cancer, at least anybody that I knew had cancer, I didn't know anybody that survived. So I didn't know what that looked like. So in going through that journey, I ended up moving to DC, because in DC, there was a doctor there that was doing some cutting edge stuff. So I moved to DC, and I was keeping a secret from everybody because they couldn't know that I was going through that, because, if they know you're sick, then you can't work, So I was going through that whole process, but something beautiful ended up happening. I ended up starting a nonprofit at the time, and I began to testify on Capitol Hill about why this is so important to start talking about this. And that nonprofit my breaking point led me to help people, sadly, with funeral arrangements, help them get their medication, educate a lot of different women about the things that they didn't know. And it was a beautiful journey for me to take, because it also healed me too, just going through that process. Then I moved back to California, and within less than a year, I birthed The Breaking Point. So the 4 B's are really important. Break up. Sometimes we have to break up with ourselves or somebody else. We're always breaking up from something, okay? And when I say break up for yourself, I mean break up from the negative parts of who you are,
I get that.
And definitely the breakdown is to humble yourself, to surrender. Sometimes what we most resist is what we need to lean into to figure out why. And then the breakthrough, you can't spell breakthrough without spelling rough. So that's the rough part of things that we have to overcome in life. And then break out is really, truly breaking out into your purpose. And that's where I was in my life. So I wrote that book. And then from that book was a workbook. And then from that book, because I have a lot of couples, I've actually helped 1,000 couples stay
Wow.
together. And I prevented probably 50% of my clients,
From
I prevented
divorcing.
them from getting married. So that means
From
that
getting
I
married.
helped. Yes. So that means that I've helped the world in terms of divorces because
Yeah, you
they
prevented
decided
divorce.
that, yeah. So that, so I've done that with the vows and helping you. Like I literally have asked the questions that nobody wants to ask. But what I'm really most proud of is my book that I have recently released, The Self Vows, and I released it when the pandemic just started.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that's what I've been so excited about. That message just resonates with me in such a deep way.
Well, it's really interesting that, in my life, cancer has hit me like twice. When I was 27, I had a level 3 sarcoma on my back
Oh,
and was
wow.
misdiagnosed as a cyst. So I had a surgery and the doctor goes, "Oops, this is a cancer." Because I had an open. They gave me anesthesia, but I was awake, so I could hear him, and I heard him say, "Hey, this is a level. This is like looks like a very aggressive cancer." So I hear that, and the previous doctor what they had told me was it was a cyst. It was benign cyst. So then, like 2 weeks later, I had to go for a wider operation. I'm 27 years old, never smoked, didn't drink, didn't have a girlfriend, and I just went through like hell, because I was like, I didn't know what to think, what to do. Nobody had that kind of experience in my family. It was a level 3.
Mm,
I could have died easy, but they went through
yes.
2 surgeries, and I did like maximum dose of radiation, and I survived.
Mm,
And it made
wow.
me feel like I had to change my life. And I actually met my wife
Mhm.
at Mount Holyoke 2 years later and had my daughter. We
Oh,
had a whole interesting life. We moved to Japan. We lived in Japan. So what I realized that I stopped being scared of telling people how I feel or
yes.
being direct. It changed my whole life by having cancer. It made me more, that's why I'm a podcaster. I'm a musician. I sing now. I never sang. It changed a lot of what I did. And then to jump
Mhm.
forward in the last 10 months, my wife got a cancer, a level 1, and she just went through radiation and chemotherapy, and it was on her back. And so it was like it hit my life twice, but because I had experienced it, I was able to kinda help her. But it's like it's so cr I
Wow.
don't yeah, so I understand what you're going through in a couple ways.
Yes. And you know what I just like to say? Like a lot of times, people will say, well, you're cancer free. Okay, everything is over, everything is done. And I'm like, no, because from having that, I ended up with endometriosis, adenomyosis, some tumors that they had to remove. And now
Mhm.
I had to have a hysterectomy, which I now have pudendal neuralgia, which the pain level is unbelievable. So when people say, well, how do you feel when you don't have pain? Well, I don't know because I
Yeah,
haven't not had pain in 9 years. But my life, as abnormal as people think that it has become the normal, but also it has made me connect deeper to gratitude about things that people just take for granted. So I think that's so amazing that even though you went through that, then who knew that you were going to marry your wife and that she was going to have that challenge, and then you were able to be used to even help her. Like that is so amazing. Talking about soulmates, like that's amazing.
yeah. It happened late. Our daughter's 23, and she caught the cancer
Mhm.
when she was, like, 22. And, so, my daughter's been home helping me. She's an artist like me. She's a graphic artist. She's in a program at a residency. So luckily, because of the
Mhm.
pandemic, she didn't have to stop. She's actually at home still doing her work, but we're all pulling together, and we understand it because like everybody knew my cancer story, and then when it happened to my wife, we're like, how could that happen? But it's like, okay, let's deal with it.
Yeah.
But it was when I was 27, I did find I actually made the mistake of telling people that I had cancer, and I saw a lot of my friends just, like, get scared. They thought it was a venereal disease. They thought they were gonna catch it, or they thought if
Yeah.
they because everybody's
Yeah.
28, if you're in the 27, 28 age, people don't wanna hear that somebody in their
Right.
age group's got something like that. So what I found is I had people backing away from me because they didn't wanna think about their own mortality. That's what I found.
Right. Right. And even now, it's the same thing. When I because I'm very open now. I used to didn't be, but I'm very open and transparent about because it helps me. It helps me to talk about it, to help someone else, to prevention. But I find that some people it makes really uncomfortable because now they're
Mhm.
forced to look at their lives. You know how unhealthy or healthy you're being, and not saying that you have to be unhealthy to get cancer, because like you said, I didn't do any of those things. Like,
That
how in
is
the
so
world did
yeah,
this happen, right?
yeah,
But I
yeah.
think also too is that what happens is you open up and then you're vulnerable, and then people get tired of, like they used to say, oh, like I felt like the sick lady, because
Oh,
then
yeah,
they would
yeah,
get
that's okay. I was a
tired
sick
of
guy.
seeing that. Right. So it's almost made I'm like, why do I feel bad for being sick? Like, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
made
you're
me
bringing a
kind of
downer.
feel
It's
that
a
way.
downer to everyone wants to go out and party. Man, I'm at, like, 27. Everybody just wants to go out and to be kinda irresponsible because that's the age where,
Yeah.
"Oh, I can go out and drink, and I can do this, and I can do that. And I could go jump off a cliff. I could go bungee cord jumping." And I was a mountain biker. So I was with all
Hmm.
these mountain bikers, and then they didn't wanna think about because we're going down Mount Snow in Vermont, going to 45 miles an hour down the mountain. And they're like, they never want to think
Wow.
about dying doing that. And then I see like, well, he's
Yeah.
sick. He's like, now he's like, he's gonna jinx me. He's gonna make me have to think about should I really be going 50 miles an hour down the fire road? Maybe shouldn't, but you
Right,
know,
right, exactly. Yeah, you're so right though. I think that the younger age, they don't want to think about it because they don't think about those things. They don't think about it's just like, they want to think that they're just invincible, that they're not going to die, or that they don't have to face cancer. That's for other people. That's not for them. And
Mhm,
then when you get
mhm.
older, then I think people get really scared because they're like, wow, I am getting older. That could be me. What would life look like? And then they just don't want to face it. So then you have those people.
Yeah, I mean, when you find out who your friends really were, I mean, I found out who like women I thought that were I should pursue, and then I saw their
Hmm.
behavior. I said, "Wow, that's not somebody I want to be my wife because they're not empathetic at all." And I
Right.
was like, and I thought,
Exactly.
I was put them on a pedestal, and then when that happened, they did this behavior. I really got to see who they were, and I kind of was like
Yes.
my litmus test that actually see who people are. And I had people I
Yes.
didn't know in my circle that actually stepped up and came to see me, and were there with me. And I had a plan. What I did is when I was recovering, I built a mountain bike from the ground up. And once I got back, I actually had a brand new bike and I hit the trail with my buddies and said, "Hey, I'm gonna get on this trail and kick your tail," you know, and then people like then they stopped thinking about it because they started seeing I came back real hard because I was like I wanted to prove something, and
Yeah.
that I could come back pretty heavy, and that was for me and kind of for them, and just the show that hey, I'm all right, but
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some things that hurt us the most, or our biggest trials, are our greatest teachers. So the cervical cancer was one of my greatest teachers because it really
mm,
challenged me to dig deep within myself, and to challenge myself with all the fear that I had. I didn't know I had that much fear until I started to
mhm,
go through that journey. And then I just kept thinking, okay, if I overcome this, then you know what? I had like a list of things that I was going to do. And I wasn't going to let anybody talk me out of it because I just was like, hey, I can live. I'm about to really live. So,
yeah.
yeah.
That's what happened. I mean, when I met my wife from Mount Holyoke, because I finally what I started to do is I was a poet, but I was scared to
Mhm.
go in front of anybody. After the cancer, I started going to
Mm.
this Northampton cafe called Fire and Water, and I started reading my poetry. And my wife
Mhm.
was going to Mount Holyoke. She saw me at this poetry thing reading, and I had suddenly people were so surprised because I was super shy, and I had been a keyboardist, but I never sang. So
Mhm.
suddenly I started singing my own songs. I started doing poetry. I started showing up at coffee houses and stuff, and people were like, "Wow, he's totally changed." And it was
Mhm.
really that I got rid of the fear because I said,
Yeah.
now that the cancer, I beat it, so I'm not going to be scared of because the thing is, when you're an artist, the second you come out, you get people who are haters and have something to
Mhm.
say. And I was always kind of like, I don't know if I'm good enough, or I don't know if I'm going to deal with that feedback. And I said, I didn't care. I didn't care about it
Mhm.
anymore. And I said,
Right.
we just put it out. And that's the biggest thing. It's like that's what gets you out there as a creator, because then you're not scared. It's like, okay, I'm going to put it out there. I know somebody's going to have an opinion. Might not be good.
Mhm.
Might be good. But you got to put it out there. And that's what I
Yeah.
learned from the cancer, just to put it out there and put myself out there.
Mhm.
And I took my
Mhm.
whole family to Japan after 9/11, like
Mm.
2004. And everybody's saying, "Oh,
Wow.
that's dangerous. That's dangerous. You shouldn't do that." And I'm like, I went through cancer. I want my family to experience living in Tokyo. I had a deal with I'm an IT guy. I got a deal to
Mhm.
live there. My daughter got to go
Mhm.
to a Japanese preschool and kindergarten, and it was like
Amazing.
fantastic. Her art
Mhm.
is inspired by that even today. So I
Yeah.
felt it was like a really good decision, and I wouldn't have done that in the world I was in before the cancer.
Right. I
It's just
think that that actually moved you closer even to authenticity of really who you were at the core. It's just sometimes in life things happen, and thank God that they do, because they unleash that out of us. And the key thing is the fear. When you really think about it, it's literally at the foundation for a lot of us. But once we come up against something that is that has been thought to be one of the worst fears, and then we go through it and we overcome it, you're never the same after that. You're like, you know what? Okay, who cares? If someone doesn't like it, if someone laughs at me, if someone rejects me, oh well, because I've been through this. So I can get through anything. That's how you feel in that moment. And you don't want to waste time anymore. You really
yeah,
want to be just
yeah.
present. Yeah.
I decided that, like, the things that I was scared of, I was gonna directly challenge. So I was scared
Mhm.
actually when I was dating people to kind of all the guys are, "Oh, you never tell women what you really think." And I said, "Well, no, that's not me. I do." And I used to get slammed for it,
Mhm.
but I said, "Well, you know what? I'm not gonna care. I'm gonna even be more honest."
Mhm.
And I just
Mhm.
got into, and that's how I met my wife, because I really got to the point where I was honest, but I knew how to articulate it better, because I guess I got some confidence from the cancer. I felt like I was like
Yes.
totally reborn. It was weird.
Mhm.
I
I
just
love that.
didn't,
That's like a rebirth. I really
yeah,
love that. That's great. And we actually get a rebirth every day because we can give ourselves a do-over every single morning. Like, your past does not have to hold you. What you did the other day, that maybe, you didn't make the mark or whatever, but you can still give yourself a do-over and have a rebirth every single day. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's absolutely your choice. I think that's like so beautiful that you started to disconnect from the fear, and then that opened you up to just a whole different world, and then you ended up meeting your wife. So
yeah.
that's
I mean,
beautiful.
and the other thing is just the authenticity that I started not liking fakeness. I didn't like
Yeah.
people who, go to the club and people have got all these stories. You go to the bar and everybody just, and I could see it. And it was just so
Mhm.
transparent. And like, you know what? So as I started going to like places to read poetry, people who,
Mhm.
coffee shops, and people who were and actually playing music. And I found that like musicians were more like they're going to keep their heart on their sleeve, and artists and poets and painters that were at these coffee shops, they were more willing to engage in something real. When I
Yes.
actually talked to them, and they would talk about their art, and they were passionate about it. And we're not
Mhm.
talking about sports or this or that, trying to impress them. We were all talking about our own thing that we were doing. And in
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
world, my wife was a playwright, and she
Okay.
needed somebody to do music for her play. And we
Mhm.
started talking about that, and then say, and I said, honestly, I want you to understand that I can work on this, but I'm attracted to you, and I don't want you to think I'm just your friend and I'm just doing this. I really want it to be more. And I was just like right from the start. And before I would have never done that. And
Mhm.
I just
Mhm.
totally was very direct, and people like, you take it or leave it. But I felt that that was the right thing to do. And because I had been the kind of person that was, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that because I'm going to lose the opportunity. And I'm like, that's what I want. That's what I'm feeling. I'm going to be honest.
Well, you did something that I always talk about, and that is, why do we show up as this representative? Because the representative is not who we are. So when we do that, then it's like we show up in something not real. And if it's not real, then it's a lie. And so what you
Mhm.
end up doing is, when you lie to people, you take their choices away. So if they knew the truth, they may make another choice. And so when you stand in your unapologetic truth, if you like it, great. If you connect to it, great. But if you don't, that's okay too. Everybody's not going to connect to everybody. But I
Yeah.
think that the respect is that, but you told me the truth. I can respect the truth like totally way more than I could respect a lie, because there is no respect for a lie, you know? So I think that that was great. That cancer then literally just ushered you into, I'm going to be me. And if you like it, great. If you don't, you're missing out, you know?
Well, I come from like a family. My mom was a coal miner's daughter for real from West Virginia, from
Oh,
Morgantown. And my
wow.
father was
Okay.
an insurance agent, but his dad was a factory worker and he was in the Negro Baseball League. And the
Mhm.
problem in my family was a lot of people like to put up appearances. There was like my dad's a sales
Mm.
guy, so sales guys are always telling stories, always trying to make themselves like it's a game. It's like it's like a mask because you have to.
Mhm.
Within sales,
Yeah.
it's a mask all the day, all day. And so sometimes my dad got home, he was tired of having that mask, and he was kind of burned out, and he really didn't have a lot to give us because he's out there trying to sell all day. And then my
Yeah.
mom, she was like, oh, she was always wanting more, but that's his job, and he didn't have it. And I would see that kind of dynamic, and it was always kind of like trying to represent that things were better than they were, and I could actually see the truth. And then my other
Yeah.
brothers, they didn't want to deal with it. They were like, "Oh, everything's great." I'm like, "There's something wrong in Denmark," But I was more the middle child, and I could kind of feel it. I don't know. I was
Yeah.
sensitive to it. I could pick it up. And that's
Yeah.
that I kinda used to hide because of that, like, I was being brought into a world where my parents were kinda not telling each other the truth, and then I was kind of well, that's
Mhm.
where you learn.
Mhm.
If your parents aren't telling each other the truth, then what are you gonna do?
Absolutely. That is so true. And a lot of times people, they learn behaviors from their parents. You know, like a baby is just not born toxic. It's just that sometimes they see who's around them and then they emulate them, you know, because they don't know any better. That's just what they see. Your mom is your mom, your dad's your dad, your aunts, your uncles. Sometimes even the beliefs we think we have, if we really challenge ourselves, we will find that it's usually someone else's belief, you know, but we like embraced it as our own. Even with social media, sometimes people get so connected into, if someone liked my post, or if some, how many comments did I get. And a lot of times we get so caught up in maybe a page and clients that I have that are wishing that they could be that person. And I say, well, how do you know that this is even the truth? Because for me, I'm like you, like I am allergic to fake. So I can smell it, I can feel it, I can sense it. So I don't want to tell them, you know, something I believe. I want them to see it on their own. But I'm like, how do you know that
Mhm.
this person is even telling the truth? How do you know if they even look like what they do? Photoshop is real, you know, and
Yeah,
they,
it's very
it's so
real.
sophisticated, right? So you can't compare yourself to anybody else, because that is a competition. You will never win, because the only person you could be absolutely unequivocally is yourself. And if you don't know who that is, take a moment to say, you know what? I'm just going to give time to try to find who that is and then connect to that. And then you can show up in a relationship, healthy and different. Because if not, you're going to expect that person to one, try to heal you, to make it okay, to make you happy, and all of those things, when really that is your responsibility. And then we show up and share that with someone else.
I think the problem is that we have a lot of advanced things to have this idealized version of love, and you always think this
Yes.
person's gonna like save you, or a lot of you, whether you're male or female, you think that your your prime mover, the person that you're totally like your soulmate, they're gonna actually like fix you. Like somehow that's
Yes.
gonna solve everything. And really it's like, it's like the looking glass, like a lot of Victorian poets, like you gotta look in that looking glass, you gotta know you. Right? You gotta
Yes.
you gotta really know you. That other person, that's not gonna fix you. You gotta fix you.
Right.
You know?
And then what if
Um,
the other person doesn't even know how to fix themselves? Why
yeah.
am I going to trust you to try to fix me?
Yeah, that's a big problem. In my world of artists, like we all have masks. Like a lot of us artists, in order to get on stage, we have a stage self,
Hmm.
right? And then we have our
Hmm.
producer self, and then we have our kind of day job self. And when you're a musician, you have to kind of believe in yourself to the point of like a little bit arrogance to be able to get on stage and carry it off. Because if you're sitting there saying, "I don't believe I'm good," how are you going to get on stage and project? You have to kind of get
Yes.
to this alpha kind of I'm the best in order to do it. And then that
Yes.
person on stage ends up not being exactly you. And then the problem is your fans think that's you, and it's actually
Hmm.
not you.
Hmm. Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and then you get
Do you
confusion with
feel that? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
you get all that confusion because you get fans that they meet you and they think you're that person. They think you're like
Hmm.
Jagger or Bowie and Prince. And Prince was real famous for like he is so dynamic and so hypersexual.
Hmm.
But when you talk to him, he was like a nerd and he could hardly talk at all. You know,
Yeah,
and I actually met him, and he's,
exactly.
like, very, very quiet, super shy, very, not as extreme as he appeared on stage at all, you know?
Hmm.
And they're like and I've met a lot of musicians that they can go on stage and they don't even remember what they did. They just, like they become kinda entranced by it, and then you kinda, like
Hmm.
people think that's really them, and it's a part of them, but it's there
Right.
for 2 hours, and the
Exactly.
rest of the day, they're not like that.
Right, exactly. And for people to even think that, that just kind of lets you know sometimes that people sometimes make a choice to say, I'm going to connect to the fantasy of it all. Like you were talking about fantasizing like relationships and what it's supposed to be like based on or versus what it really is, right? And so the person that
Mhm.
people are on stage, actors, I think that people make up in their mind that that person is that all the time. And then sometimes when they meet that person in person, they're all of a sudden so disappointed because they have gotten so caught up in whatever that persona is and forgetting that, like, yeah, they're an actor. So, who they
Yeah.
really are is not that same person. So,
Yeah, and a lot of musicians, we theater. I mean, Bowie was kind of a big push of that. Gaga does, but there's certain musicians that it just becomes that. I mean, if you like
mhm,
Mick
mhm.
Jagger, he's on stage and he does this crazy kind of like strutting, but you talk to him, he's like a British gentleman, like CEO. He's
Yeah,
very a businessman. He's
that is
totally
so
business.
true.
And he's
Right. That
not
is
like
so
that at
true.
all. He just
Yeah.
he's not that guy on stage. He's this business guy. You're like you'd be talking to a CFO. You're like, "What?" Like,
Mhm.
wow. He's not at all in that mode. And that's what I met musicians that do that. And I met a guy one time who was a hip hop guy, and I was doing some very experimental stuff where I do like female voices with vocoders and I wear masks and I have,
Mhm.
a whole stage thing. And I didn't know how people were going to take me. And these guys were really tough and they had this hip hop kind of gangster rap look. I didn't know if they were going to like take offense to what I was doing because I
Mhm.
was doing like this female
Mhm.
voice. And the guy came
Mhm.
up to me and he was talking to me. I had assumed he was going to be this tough guy that would want to tear me apart. And then I
Uh-huh.
talked to him and he actually appreciated what I was doing and he would start asking me like another producer what I was doing. So then I said, wow, he's wearing a mask just like me. He wasn't what I
Wow.
thought. He had this tough guy kind of gangster thing, but he wasn't. He was like a middle class guy that was projecting that, but he wasn't even that
Right.
at all. He was projecting that
Right.
he was this guy, this tough alpha guy, and he wasn't even like
Mhm.
that. That's
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
mask, and I'm like, people don't get that, but that's a lot of times what it is.
But I also think that it is important for us to be vulnerable to who is deserving of our measurements of vulnerability. So, and taking that mask off and just being. But I do think that sometimes when we don't know a person or we're not comfortable, we are figuring things out on if we can lean in that way, and maybe we can't. And
Mhm.
so I think we do that even in the workplace. People wear
Yeah.
all kinds of masks in the workplace.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then you see them out somewhere and you're like, that is not the same person. Like, what have you done with the person that I work with? You know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the corporate America puts you in like a box, because
Yes.
I do IT work, but I'm a musician,
Hmm.
and so I have a part of my brain that's like I'm a musician, I'm experimental, I do all this strange stuff people wouldn't even know, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's like I don't use my normal name because in my business I work with insurance companies and banks, and they're very conservative, and they
Yes.
probably wouldn't get what I'm
Yes.
doing. So I'm like, I don't even want to
Right.
tell. I don't even tell them that I'm the ghost
Right.
because like
Right. Well, you're a ghost. You
yeah, they don't need to
you
know
don't
it.
mix the connection. Yeah.
They don't
No,
need to
but you
know
know what? I've never met a IT musician ever.
that.
So that's a very interesting mix. And I can really appreciate that because I do connect to a lot of artists being here. And I love the fact of the creativity that flows from creatives. But I've never met a musician and an IT person in the same body because
Yeah, it's a
the
little different.
IT person is so technical and usually they're very introverted. But
Yeah,
then the musicians are literally the opposite. They can be
yeah,
introverted too, because
yeah,
like you said, sometimes on stage it's a difference.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm a synthesis. If you see behind me, I got nothing but synthesizers. So
Oh,
synthesizers
wow.
tend to be very technical. So I grew up
Okay.
being a piano player, and then I
Mm-hmm.
got into synthesizers because I'm a child of the '70s. I'm 55. So I got into new wave, I got into jazz, I got into fusion. And then I just like synthesizers is what it allowed me to do because I'm a control freak. I admit it. I was in
Mm-hmm.
bands and then bands stopped showing up. So I wanted to be able to play all the parts. And
Mm-hmm.
synthesizers allow you to
Oh,
play everything.
okay.
So I can
Yeah.
play the bass, I can play the drums, I can do all this stuff. So in the nature of being a technical guy, understanding that I can build sounds. I build sounds for my synthesizers from scratch. So being a programmer and being a synthesist is not that different. You see bands like Genesis and Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. All those synthesizer players were highly technical musicians, right? So
Mm,
there's a type of
that
thing when
makes
you get into
sense.
new wave music and you get Duran Duran. You see all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
They were very artistic. They were doing a lot of stuff that was like gender bending, but they're very technical. They
Mm-hmm.
understood what the tools they were using. It wasn't just a guitar, it's actually a computer that happens to make music. And then you can come at it from an artistic point of view, but you have to be somewhat technical. So it opened up to people that you would have never thought would be a musician, but were there. Bands like
Mm-hmm.
New Order and Depeche Mode and the Duran Durans. That's where that kind of thing comes into play. But
Well, you have taken me back to junior high school because I was probably in my head married to every band member in Duran Duran and Depeche Mode. Like those were the bands that, oh my gosh, we were
yeah,
so in love with the sound and all of that.
I
But
love new
yeah,
wave. I mean, I kind of came out of progressive rock and into new wave. I
right.
appreciate like it kind of like you took a band like Genesis and you take a band like Pink Floyd, and then what you get is a more precise use of the synthesizer to make something more poppy and more funky.
Hmm.
And so it's like
Yeah.
what I love
Yeah.
about new wave is it's a hybrid of
Hmm.
R&B and funk and rock all at once. It's very genre bending. And then it became
Hmm.
like also
Hmm.
even like gender bending because they look at the Duran Duran, they were all pretty
Yeah.
guys. You have Prince,
Yeah.
he's a
Yeah.
pretty guy. There's the idea that you could go and do this Victorian thing. And during the
Yeah.
whole thing, you had this
Absolutely.
And I did that with my music because I actually, I found that the higher pitched voices, falsettos in music,
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing something real heavy, it's good to actually have a falsetto. So I started to pitch my voice with machines that would pitch my
Mm,
voice to a more female sound because it cuts through. And you'll see, like, even the Axl Roses and the Led Zeppelins, why are the male voices so pitched? Because if you have something real heavy going on in the mix, it's actually good to have that kind of female kind of voice because it cuts through, and it
mm-hmm.
allows you that to have the headroom. It's just a thing that happens, and you'll see a lot of times in music, there's a lot of use of higher pitched voices to kind of cut through the mix, and then it kind of allows you to bring in ideas like Bowie did, and
Mm-hmm.
and Jagger and all these other people. But yeah, there's a kind of gender bending and all kinds of stuff that can happen because you're like, hey, I'm going to take advantage of that and then use it. It's part of the whole
Mm-hmm.
match. But yeah, it
Do
gets a
you
little
feel
heavy.
that in the music industry or just artists in general, do you feel that they are willing to lean more into the idea of consistent um, mental health in terms of getting healthy, dealing with their issues, their challenges, um, and that they need more of a safe haven for them to be their authentic self because they are sometimes playing characters so much.
Yeah, what I
So,
find,
do you?
yeah, I
Mhm,
mean, what I find with musicians is that we tend to take our pain and turn it into art. So
mhm,
we're taking
mhm,
our diaries and turn them into songs. And so a lot of
mhm,
times when you see
mhm,
singer-songwriters, we take the most painful things that ever happened a lot of times.
mhm, mhm.
And we take the things that are joyful, but a lot of great music is driven by pain. It's driven by sorrow,
Absolutely.
and
That's
most
kind
great
of like
artists.
journaling in a way though, right?
Yeah,
It's like journaling. And then that journaling can turn into a great piece of art or a great song, and you're right. Most of the songs that were just the most amazing songs have come from some sense of pain because we can connect to it. Yeah.
yeah, so the artists, the creators, we tap into that, and everybody
Hmm.
what we're able to do is take those universal concepts and express them in art, right? We can express them into video or theater or music, and that's our talent. Now, the problem is sometimes we put ourselves out there so much that we're so much an open book that we don't give ourselves space. And then that
Right.
causes mental health issues because if you're always putting out like everything about you
Hmm.
to such an extent you have like no boundaries, then you're like, where's your
Yeah.
safe spot? Right. So then people can
Exactly.
get withdrawn or they can get into all kinds of psychosis. You can get problems. I've run
Hmm.
into musicians, they get so caught up in the stage self that
Hmm.
they're actually unhappy all day until they get 2 hours on the stage. And then when they're off the stage, they're unhappy again. And then they have to
Yeah.
use whatever means to make themselves feel okay. Right. And then that's a
Right.
bad, unhealthy life. And then the problem is the industry doesn't care if that's what the person
No.
has to do. They'll let the person go into the ground. You know,
Yeah.
so you have to be very
Absolutely.
careful
And
because your
and it's,
management,
about the
90, yeah,
boundaries, that is very, very important, is boundaries and knowing how to set those boundaries. Your boundaries are a non-negotiable and they have to have a consequence. So you can't just set a boundary and there's no consequence. And then you have to enforce that consequence. So for example, if I said, okay, you don't get to yell at me. So if this individual then continues to yell, then you have to enforce the consequence. Maybe the consequence is that, okay, I'm not going to stand here or sit here for you to yell at me. The conversation is now over because now you have no respect for my boundaries. And I think that is so important, not only with musicians, especially with musicians, because sometimes you want that big break so much that you're literally seeing yourself betray your own self regarding boundaries. So that is very important. And I think that also what's very important too is you talked about space, leaving space for you, your authentic self, and who you really are. Because when you start to just give it all, everything to anybody, you don't know if that's even safe, and that person, if they're not healthy, who knows what they will do with that information? They could use it against you. They could then start to manipulate you. They could be a narcissist. It could be so many different things. You have to have enough discernment also about yourself that when your core says no, it means no. You know how people say, oh, I should have followed my first mind? Yeah, you should
Mhm.
have. Because now
Yeah.
you see with following the second mind, that's not really your first. That's what you should have did. Well, you see what the result in that is. So
The problem is the industry kind of pushes you to do very unhealthy things, right? So a lot of
yes.
times the most money you get is from doing the most like dangerous thing for you. And so
Hmm.
you put yourself into the scenario that puts you into the danger zone, but then that makes you kind of, oh well, that's the nature of it. And we've seen like what happens when like the 28 Club, you get Janis Joplin, Hendrix, and Morrison. They pushed it. They pushed it
Hmm.
way beyond. And we've got
Hmm.
stories, where that happens. Like, in the music industry, that happens a lot because people get put on a trail, put on a rail, and it's very hard to tell. Because then what happens is you got all these people working, they basically their livelihood depends on you. And then you have a
Yeah.
very unhealthy type of thing. And then you feel guilty if you don't do the tour. You do feel guilty if you don't support all those families, the roadies, and all
Right.
the people in the light management people and all the other people. And you suddenly have all these people,
Mhm.
hundreds of people dependent on you. And it's not
Right.
just about your music anymore. It's actually about that. And then, yeah, then you get stuck because then you don't know how to say no. You don't know how to tell people no.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to tell people like, I'm not tour. I need to take a
Hmm.
break. I'm not doing
Right.
this next album.
Exactly.
I'm not doing it. And you just got to be able to stand up and then, you start doing more healthy things,
Yeah.
come out to New Hampshire and hike instead of going to the club all night.
Exactly. Connect to nature. That is so serene. I'm right by the beach here, but I love the water. That just seems to bring everything in clarity, for me. And I do feel that you have to be able to have the courage to say no. And it is a full statement. You really don't even need to say anything other than that is no. If you want to say, I need space for myself, then you can say that too. And it's about being full of whatever it is that makes you you. It's not because people say, oh, that's selfish. You're not thinking about anybody else. Well, if I'm not okay, then none of it matters anyway.
It's gonna
So
matter
I
because
have to be
you're
okay.
you're in the music industry. You're a business. Like one person
Right.
you know is actually supporting like 1,000 people. When you get out there
Yeah.
to the high levels, and so it is important for you to know when you can't do it because
Hmm.
you end up
Hmm.
getting the stories like the Kurt Cobain. There's a famous conversation where Neil Young called him and
Hmm.
recognized what he was going through and
Hmm.
said, "You need to tell your management that you need a break."
Hmm.
There's a famous
Yes.
conversation that was known that
Hmm.
Neil actually told that he needed to take a break, but the machine he
Yes.
was on didn't want him taking a break, and it just
Hmm.
led to disaster because Neil could see that he needed a break because he had been
Hmm.
through that. And that's what I really like about Neil Young is he would reach out to other artists when he saw the same kind of
Hmm.
problem. And he actually wrote about it in songs like Needle and the Damage Done. He had done a lot
Hmm.
of work and self-assessment of his own scene, actually talking
Right.
about how it can go really bad and trying to put out
Hmm.
warnings to other musicians that you need to take the
Hmm.
time. And I always
Yeah.
loved the fact that it was like that because he's actually being a teacher,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
being a mentor and telling
Yeah,
people like,
absolutely.
you need to take a break.
Yeah, I think that definitely more, whatever you are, musician, artist, creative, whatever it is, I honestly feel like they really need it the most because they're always trying to prove themselves. A lot of them are, to that they are really good, and that they are worthy, that they are valuable. And so I think that they really need someone more than anybody in that space, because they're constantly dealing with those thoughts every single day. So I think it's just so needed, for our creatives, definitely. And
Yeah, 'cause
sometimes, go ahead.
go ahead. Well, it's like the feedback loop is kind of dangerous too, because what happens is like you need that fan recognition and then it becomes addictive, right? You need to
Yes,
know that the fans
absolutely.
dig your, and some
Mhm.
people like live for that fan rush. And when I've actually had it when I've been on stage, and like after you get like you're being in front of like 1,000 people and that energy hits you, it takes a long time to come down. Like you could be at like at one
Mm,
o'clock in the morning and you can't sleep because you're still
mm,
kind of body is pulsating from all that energy, and that's where the problems
mm.
start happening. Because then, like,
Yeah,
the next day you got another show because you didn't think it out, and you're not getting sleep because you're all keyed up, and then that puts you on a
right.
cycle, and you can see what can happen. It's like, w why
Yes, absolutely.
so
Yeah, absolutely. Because then now you have to energize yourself, because now you're really tired and you're sleep deprived. And like you said, the machine that's behind you is like, oh well, you still have to perform.
yeah, you gotta give yourself enough in between shows that when you get
Yeah.
smarter, you don't do it back to back. You give yourself a time to kinda crash and come back in a way that you don't stress yourself out. Where when
Hmm.
they're young, they get the kids when they're 17 to 21, 22, and they get them on that train, and it puts them into
Yeah.
super bad habits, and it's like it's
Hmm.
just really destructive, and I hate it when I see it because I'm like, "You don't have to do that. You can be on YouTube. You could be on Twitch.
Right.
You don't have to
Right.
let them force you into that. You can kinda start to dictate that
Hmm.
I don't have to do that. I can be on TikTok, right? I can
Right.
control that. I can go when I want to. I can get out in
Hmm.
front of somebody and then do a show 2 weeks later. I don't gotta do it every day, and this is where the people gotta learn, like you said, to say no and to realize what they're worth. You gotta realize what you're worth and actually force people to, to accept it because that's what it is, and I think
Yes.
that that's just better for everybody so we don't end up having people crash out.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of people that are doing that. I mean, the suicide rates are unbelievable right now. And it's not just one age group, it's literally affecting so many people, because that's what happens. They don't get the assistance, they don't get the help, and they crash and they burn. Or they have people that are around them are toxic and that are not going to support you in what you should do for your health. They're going to just support, okay, no, go out there and get it done, make the money, just it's so selfish. But you're right, like you could be on YouTube and literally have the flexibility, have more control of your career, have more control of your brand, and not have to deal with all the other politics that sometimes come along with that. You still, even doing that though, you still have to set boundaries. And sometimes those boundaries are setting them for yourself, knowing when to take the space for self care. Because if you're not okay, you can have all the money in the world and it's not going to matter, because if you don't have your health, if you don't have your mind and your well-being, then none of that stuff matters. And you said something that is so true. I have met people that are so addicted to fame. They're not even addicted to the money that they make. They're addicted to the fame part of it. That's the part they don't want to give up. That's the part that once they don't have the fame anymore and it's on to the next, that's the thing that causes them to really go into a dark place. Not the
Mhm.
fact that they don't have all the money that they
Yeah.
used to have, it's the fame part.
Yeah, I mean, it's very addictive when you finally, you get recognition because like man, all musicians that we spend a lot of time by ourselves. But
Hmm.
we're in the lab, we're put in the studio, and we're really not connected at that time. And then when you go
Yeah.
out there, it's like a validation of your work. And then, actors do it when they're on a film set, and then see
Hmm.
their work. They spent like a year doing it musicians, we're the same. We spend a lot of time putting it together, and then suddenly we put it out, and we kind of need that feedback. We need that feedback to
Yeah.
know that we did it, and then it makes feel, it basically validates. And you shouldn't have to be validated, because sometimes like it doesn't validate, because like you did something really different, and then the fans don't get
Mhm.
it.
Right,
Then
exactly.
yeah, and then you're like, oh, that didn't work. But
I think that it's human to need to need a certain amount of validation of, yeah, you did a good job. That was great. I love that. Or the feedback. But I do think that we honestly have to be our own cheerleader first. If you think it's great, then stand in that truth. Maybe the other people have the problem. Maybe you're the one with the golden ticket. Maybe everyone else just didn't get it. That's not your fault that they can't catch the vision, right? But I really feel like we have to do that for ourselves first, because if we're always in our head about what do they think, what do they feel, did they like it, should I have done this better, you can literally just drive yourself in an unhealthy place, because you can just keep going through a spiral to where sometimes it's going to be hard for you to climb yourself out of it. Instead of just saying, I am going to be my cheerleader first, and then everyone else stand in line and cheer for me, but I'm going to do it first, you know?
well, that's why I was talking to a lot of people during the pandemic, and I do a lot of live stuff from my studio. And I've got like 3 camera shots, and I do these live rehearsals. And people
Yeah.
were telling me a lot of rock bands were having a hard time in the pandemic. Like singers, guys who are like me, who are electronic, and we can do it kind of all by ourselves. We can do really well. But if you're in a situation where you have a drummer and a bass player and a singer, and you're in the pandemic, you were locked down, you couldn't perform because you're all like in separate houses and you're not together. And
Hmm.
a lot of those bands was like, well, I can't really go online because I can't feel the audience. And I
Yeah.
said, well, when I do my online, I get kind of in a state where I'm just happy about what I'm writing, and I get in that trance. I don't really need that audience. I mean, I played in New York. I know what it's like to have an audience, but you got to kind of get in a zone as a musician where you're so into what you're playing that you're just happy
Hmm.
about that. And if you get into
Yeah.
that place, you're not worrying about hearing the crowd clapping and hearing the people like saying everything, then you can do it. But if you're kind of in this mode where you had to be in that unit, in that club, getting that feedback, it's a different thing than if you're doing stuff online. Some people couldn't figure out how to operate during the pandemic because they couldn't, without that instant feedback, they didn't feel good. I don't
Yeah.
know, so it's like you do have to be happy with what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's beautiful that you concentrated on the happiness that you felt from it and what you were getting from it. And you were just in that zone. And I do think most people will actually connect to that, whether you're virtually or whether you're in person. Now, I did miss being in person with people, just speaking. I miss that. I miss that feedback. I miss the energy of it. But I had to really challenge myself in the pandemic. And I really had to focus on what I was feeling, how it was connecting to me, what was my own feedback. And so now that I'm in person with people again, I'm much more grounded though. I'm different now, in
Mhm.
how I actually just even communicate with the audience. So I actually am very thankful, not of all the deaths that happened in the pandemic. That's not what I'm saying. I'm thankful for the self reflection that I was able to do because things stopped and I was able to literally disconnect from the distractions. And that's what I was telling even my business clients. And when they were trying to pivot, I'm like, this is golden right now because you can literally concentrate now. You don't have to worry about all this other stuff. You can really focus on how you want your business to be or how you want to communicate to your audience. Or there was a lot of people in the pandemic that were married for years and they were in quarantine together. And they were
That's a
like,
problem.
who have I been married to? Who are you? Like,
Yeah,
what's happening here? So you
Yeah.
have people saying, you know what, you're gonna have to go to the shed because I cannot be in
Well, if
this
you're like you one of
continuum.
these a lot. I was a road warrior. I was on the road flying like Monday to Sunday to Thursday, and my wife, my daughter weren't used to me being home except on the weekend. And then when I'm home
Mhm.
all the time, they say, you know what? You stay in your man cave, stay in your studio because you're causing trouble. so so like luckily because I did what a lot of artists did. If I didn't have to travel for shows, then I could actually
Mhm.
work on an idea for longer length of time and actually put the time in that I wanted to. So I
Yeah.
found a lot of musicians during the pandemic were able to put 6 months or a year into a project where they weren't interrupted by having to tour. And it kind of
Yeah.
is creating a lot of good music. I've been talking to a lot of emerging and underground artists that have been writing during this period, and there's some really awesome stuff coming out of it because people did
Mhm.
self-reflect. They did put the time
Mhm.
in. They did put a lot more effort. So we potentially have a lot of awesome music coming, whether or not
Yeah.
people hear it because of different
Mhm.
channels they're on. But yeah, I just thought it was like it was a benefit, even though it's all this tragedy, for people to actually focus on their art and actually get
Yeah.
it to a place where you may not possible before.
Yeah, to take a pause. And I really hope that people don't forget that pause, that they just take that with them, for the rest of the time that you're on this earth. And remember, when you get too far away from what feels good to you and what's peaceful to you, that you will remember that time of how it felt just to self reflect and to really get to know not only yourself better, but to get to know your family better. Because sometimes we just take things for granted when we are just constantly working or just constantly dealing with the distractions, that are all around us. So yeah, it was actually a gift to a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, not having to commute and then being actually able to actually take time to actually listen to my daughter go through all the things
Mhm.
she's going through, and not have to worry about I got to jump on a plane, or I
Yeah.
got to jump in the Uber. I'm going to be late. I got to get on, and so when that's taken away and I can just do everything from home, that did allow me to have a better relationship with everybody. Even my
Yeah.
friends, I actually could call people, and they had more time
Mhm.
to talk. And I was talking to some
Yeah.
guy I grew up with from like I knew him since I was 12 years old, and we
Mhm.
started to have this really deep conversation with he was my best friend, and we just kept on talking to each other 4 times a week, and we
Mhm.
continued even now. We
Mhm.
still talk, and it was really cool to reconnect with somebody I knew when I was 12 years old. We were playing like Lego together. And that's just like, it was just like a gift to actually have somebody that knew me when I was 12 years old. And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
to actually be able to talk to somebody from that kind of point in your life, that made me feel really good. That was like
Yeah.
worth a lot to me. And I think it was worth a lot to him too,
Mhm.
because it was like he felt like he wanted that connection, you know.
Mm.
But
That's
I
great.
think I think everything that we're talking about tonight is a lot of good things for like a lot of my prime audience are musicians that sometimes might not take the time to think about like self-care, to think about
Mhm.
maybe going and get to a therapist or realizing that they need a therapist or realizing that they need to look in a mirror and think about what they're doing. And I
And
always like
sometimes
to, yeah,
absolutely. It sometimes, I just want to say to your listeners, just to think about lastly, is that sometimes it's not always just walking into an office of a therapist or virtually connecting with a therapist or a coach, or any type of self help. Sometimes it might just be sitting with yourself to identify and start writing. I think writing is beautiful to start writing those things down to identify what's really going on. And then you will get the answer and what you need to do. Sometimes it starts with a book, reading a book, just about self help. Sometimes it's YouTube videos, and then that may then usher you into the next step. And then sometimes people are just open and they're like, no, I need to talk to someone. I just
Mhm.
want you to know that um, just make sure that you connect with someone that you feel safe with. Because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to be authentic, you're not going to be honest. And what would be the point of going to a therapist or a coach and you're literally hiding things from the person that's supposed to help you? So that's what I would say, to just start with that. And I know that people say love yourself, but how about we just start with liking yourself? Like yourself first, start spending time with yourself. You will eventually start falling in love, and then you will then grow to love yourself in the different measurements of love. So that's what I would definitely like to give to your audience. If you are interested in actually just getting a book that will guide you through the process of self exploration, please get the Self Vows. You can find that on Amazon. You can go to the selfvows.com. You can find it there. And what I do want, I didn't even know I was going to do this, but I'm going to do it. So, because I think that musicians, sometimes it's a little bit harder for them to realize that, oh, I need to stop because of the pressure. I would love for your anybody in your audience that really wants to just talk to figure out, if I do need to speak to someone. I definitely, I guess you're going to put up all my information, but they
Yeah.
can reach out to me and I will give them 30 minutes free of just, if they just need to get it off their chest, because I am really, really connected to what I do. And that means a lot to me when I can just be that for someone that maybe this is all not very familiar to them. So,
Mhm.
and they can also just reach out at 888-983-4446. And yeah, so I just wanted to give that to your listeners because I do
Oh,
think it's
thank you.
very important. Mhm.
Yeah, if you want to, I mean, you can send me a private on that, and I can include it in the description when we publish. What
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
yeah,
Okay.
so, thank you. I think we hit our hour-long mark, and that's kinda like our sponsors don't like us going over an
Thank
hour, so
you.
but,
Thank you.
it's always really cool when the conversation actually happens, and I don't even think about it, and we hit the hour.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
I try to do that. It's just I've been doing it since 2016. It's really fun to meet different people all the time, and I appreciate your time with us today. I think everybody should go out to theselffollows.com and remember the phone number that was just repeated. This is going to be published on multiple platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter right now, and we're going to send you all those links. And we actually create a landing page. We do a blog article on famelectroghost.com with the landing page on where it is on social media. So all those things we'll let you know through the means of
Thank you.
connecting. But yeah, we'll be fully published by tomorrow. But we are live tonight on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. So
Thank you very much. I appreciate everything. Have a beautiful, beautiful evening. Thank you so much. It was a beautiful conversation.
thank you very much too.
Okay. Bye bye.